election unfolds. But for more on this, we're joined in the studio by the Group Foreign Editor for Independent Media, Shannon Ibrahim. Shannon, thank you so much for making the time this morning. First off, let's start with the concept of midterm elections. Unpack what they are for us and what is at stake in this election?
Okay. Well, there are main national elections in the US every 4 years. So this is the halfway point of 2 years, which is largely considered a referendum on President Trump's presidency and his policies. And today, as the US electorate goes to vote, they're voting for governorships. There are 36 out of 50 governorships that will be elected, governors of the states, like premiers of our provinces. There will be also...
And this is party-based. They have to be party members, either in Democrats or
it'll be basically between the two, Democrats and Republicans. And then in the House of Representatives, there are 435 seats up for grabs. That's all the seats in the House of Representatives, of which if the Democrats could get 220, if they could win 22 seats, they'll probably control the House of Representatives. And then in the Senate, there are 35 seats up for grabs. And if the Democrats can get 2 of those, more than what they have now, they'll control the Senate as well. And there's also local elections as well as that. So it's a broad-based election.
What's the place of the independents in this election?
The independents haven't featured very much. It really is largely a contest between the two major parties in the United States, and the independents have been largely frustrated.
What's your sense? Who's likely to win in this particular round?
It's very difficult to say. There are 37 races that are up for grabs that look like a 50-50 split. So even the best political analysts are not really able to call the election today. But given the fact that the Democrats are really pushing to get the vote out, a lot of the polls are saying they could get 222 seats to the Republican, maybe 213 seats, which would give them a 7-point lead. So the stakes are very high, basically, and no one could really accurately project, I think, at this point.
Who comprises Trump's base within the Republicans?
Well, basically, the core of his base is the populist right. We know them to be what people call the rabid right. They're xenophobic, racist, they are nationalist, and they are very against free trade. So that comprises the main base of his support. But he also draws a lot of support from the white evangelical community, who are very pleased with his socially conservative policies on abortion, on gay marriage, and they seemed less fazed by issues of morality or his comments on women. Then we also have the libertarians, who are very much in favor of his tax cuts and not so much in favor of his free trade policies. But then you have a lot of Republicans who are not too sure what to make of Trump. Those are the conservative Republicans, the traditionals, who believe in free trade and cutting deficits, and they're not too pleased with Trump. So really it's the populist right and the evangelicals that form the base of his support.
Some of the things you've mentioned are a worrying factor of this support base. What does it say to America's foreign policy in terms of how the rest of the world wants to interact with this nation?
Well, I think the rest of the world is quite worried about a continuing Trump presidency. He's been very isolationist. He's given up on a lot of the trade deals, the Trans-Pacific trade deals, as well as the North American free trade deal. And he's really appealing to a very right-wing racist base within his own country that will dictate his priorities and his policies. So I think the rest of the world is watching very clearly. We have one of the most prominent professors and political commentators, Noam Chomsky, having said that for him, at his age, this is the gravest moment in human history and in his lifetime, and he believes that these US midterm elections will impact severely on this point in our history what the United States is going to do and the capacity or not to block Trump's policies.
Former President Barack Obama has also branded him a liar and a fearmonger. How should we be reading the outcome if the Democrats come out victorious? Does it mean America once again are stamping Donald Trump's authority on how they want America to become?
Well, the Democrats know the importance of this election. It's a critical point in U.S. history. They want to be able to block Trump's nominees. They want to block his legislation, and they want to have more members on the congressional committees to ensure that he's investigated, that they could see his tax returns. So they are pulling out all the stops to get women, younger voters, and people of color to come out and vote. And I think they've learned the lesson from the previous election, where there was a lot of apathy, that they actually need to rally around the cause and make sure that people come out today and vote in large numbers that perhaps didn't do so the last time.
One of the things that Donald Trump has focused on during his presidency is clamping down illegal immigration, almost to the exclusion of trying to build the economy, although he's had those fights with China in the trade wars. Why has he focused on illegal immigration, and has it been beneficial?
Well, it's very interesting, Desiree, because at a time where the American economy is doing so well, it's 3.1% economic growth, you would expect a president to focus on the economy. But he actually says in his rallying for this election campaign that it's boring to talk about the economy. We'd rather talk about illegal immigration. And that's really because at the time where the economy is doing so well, he's so unpopular. His popularity rating is 39%, which is very low for a U.S. president in a midterm election. So what he's doing is appealing to the fear factor and illegal immigration, and he's really capitalized on what he calls this caravan of a few thousand people that have been marching from an impoverished Honduras up through Mexico to the US border. And we know that these people, from the actual evidence, are very poor. Some of them are barefooted. They're young men and women with their children in strollers who are coming from a largely destroyed country with a military dictator who is backed by the United States and who's literally destroyed the social compass of that country. So they're coming and fleeing as refugees to the United States. And what has Trump done? He's characterized them as killers, rapists, Arabs, people who are terrorists, people with diseases. So he's appealing to that rabid right-wing base of his to say, we are going to be able to secure our borders. Only I can secure our country. So we even have quite intellectual white evangelicals saying, yes, Trump is doing the right thing. These people should come in legally. They should go the legal route. And Trump is right to secure our borders, not paying any attention to the humanitarian element of this. So we really see that Trump is going to his lowest base by trying to incur people's fear.
The general sentiment that has been echoed quite a few times, you said it as well at the beginning of the conversation, that this is a referendum on Trump's policies. Give us just a breakdown of his domestic policies and how those have panned out. Has anything he has put out there really worked out for Americans?
Well, it's worked out for the people at the top, the people with the money. So he has given lavish gifts in the form of tax breaks to the rich and the corporate elite, and they are very, very pleased with him. Joseph Stiglitz, the very well-known economist, has said this could be called basically a tax break for the donors of Trump's party, and for the general ordinary average,
almost like a refund,
basically, for their support. And the people on the general masses in the United States, he's done very little or cared little for their lot in life. He's basically destroyed medical care. He's cut away at Social Security. So anything that benefits ordinary people, he's done precisely the opposite. And I think this is also an attempt to break away and destroy the legacy of Barack Obama. So the only people who can really say that he's done well for them are the people at the top. There are also those in the middle class who believe that free trade has really affected their ability to have jobs. And so they're very pleased with the fact that he's undermined the North American Free Trade Agreement and would rather pursue bilateral trade agreements. So I think for them that those people are very happy. But for the masses of Americans, nobody can really point to what Trump has done for them.
What have been the lessons for the Democrats in this election cycle, starting from the time that Donald Trump won the election? I remember when it happened, we were at the American embassy. Ambassador Patrick Gaspard was still the ambassador in South Africa, and he was totally shocked by the result. Have they recovered? Will they be able to come back?
I think the Democrats have learned the lesson from that last election. There were many people, when I was recently in New York, I met some people who are traditional Democrats, and they say, you know, we just never thought that Trump could actually get in with his crazy policies. So we didn't really lobby, we didn't rally, we didn't election campaign, electioneer. And this time they're going to pull out all the stops. They're going to be on the phone, door to door. And we've seen...
brought in Barack Obama.
Yes, yes. And we know that the celebrity base in the U.S. and Hollywood are very influential. So we've seen the likes of Brad Pitt, Alicia Keys, and even Oprah Winfrey going door to door to campaign in the key swing states and really get the message out that people mustn't be apathetic this time. This time they actually have to make their voices heard, because this is our chance basically to block what Trump is trying to push through in the last 2 years of his term. And this is our chance to basically ensure that we can control the Congress again. And that's the only check and balance to Trump's power, which is moving in a terribly dangerous right-wing direction.
South Africa is also going to the elections, to the polls next year. What lessons can we learn from the American voting process?
I think South Africans...
especially in terms of apathy, in terms of our the voting base.
Yes, I think that we have to look at this and see why is it that people are calling this the most one of the most important midterm elections in U.S. history. And that is because people have a chance to determine government policy, as we do in South Africa. So to sit back and say, well, you know, the ruling party is going to win, or you know, the opposition parties will do fine. I think each of us has a responsibility to actually say what it is that we feel, which will actually, in the end of the day, impact on government policy.
What should be the desirable result in this midterm election?
I think for the sake of human history and a progressive American policy, both domestically and internationally, we need to have a counterbalance to Trump. Unless we would like to see, you know, absolutely gross violations of climate change and escalation towards a new genre of nuclear weapons. On a whole range of issues, the world is threatened by Trump presidency. So for the Democrats to at least control the House of Representatives and the Senate gives a chance for people to actually impact on his forward trajectory and maybe like lessen its trajectory.
Let's just move on to other issues. President Cyril Ramaphosa is answering questions in Parliament this afternoon, and the one that's top of mind is the VBS fraud and corruption saga. What is your take on President Cyril Ramaphosa's presidency since February?
I think personally President Ramaphosa has done very well. I think he put forward an agenda of what he would like to accomplish, and he's stuck to those largely. He's made sure that investment and bringing in foreign investment is top of the government's priority. He's gone around the world. I was with him in New York at the UN. I think he did 15 speeches in the course of 3 days, and he was very impressive in terms of allaying the fears of the international investors in terms of South Africa's land reform policy, how we will do this, but we'll do it in a responsible manner. And it won't affect economic growth or food production. He's set his targets of how much money he would like to attract from investors, and I think he's on his way to accomplishing that, and also to turn around the failing SOEs and make sure that they can be more productive and cut their losses. Yeah,
one of the investments he's been able to secure is that 10 billion rands from Saudi Arabia, and you've written somewhat about how that is not good money. What's good money? What's not good money? And why is there issue with money coming from Saudi Arabia?
If we look at Saudi Arabia's investment, and our president went there to court investment, investment can be quite constructive from Saudi Arabia. We have a huge deal with regards to renewable energy, solar and wind power, and those are things that benefit South Africa, and we do need their investment. But the issue that I took when I wrote about it is South Africa's own act, in terms of our Arms Control Act of 2002, says that we're not allowed, it's illegal for South Africa to sell armaments to countries involved in a civil war, involved in repression and human rights abuses. On all those scores, Saudi Arabia fails. And the problem is many people, even within Denel...
Even recently, actually.
Yes. Yeah. Well, many people in Denel didn't even fully realize that we've been selling arms to Saudi Arabia and the UAE throughout the course of the war in Yemen for the last 3 years since 2015. And our arms sales to them have actually escalated, which is really problematic in terms of our own law. And given the humanitarian disaster, they say in terms of the biggest humanitarian catastrophe in the world today is Yemen, where many of the children are starving, their mothers are emaciated, unable to feed them. The situation, according to the head of the humanitarian chief at the UN, is worse than any humanitarian worker will have ever seen in their lifetime in terms of starvation levels. And I don't think we want to be supporting, in terms of our armaments, the perpetration of that war. I think we need to make a clear decision on a matter of principle that in terms of arms going to countries involved in such wars, we draw a line. And we hope that that's what our government will do, and they will relook at the policy that they have on our arms sales. But with regards to other investments with Saudi Arabia, there are many ways in which Saudi Arabia can assist our economy.
And in terms of recent examples about the humanitarian situation that you're referring to, the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the whole world, it makes sense that people initially will react with an outpouring of grief. But there are some people who have argued that Jamal Khashoggi is not the angel that everybody has made him out to be. What are your thoughts about the Jamal Khashoggi story?
You know, I spoke to Ibrahim Rasool, who had been our ambassador to the US, and he had many interactions with Jamal Khashoggi. And he said to me, you know, we may have criticized him for being too moderate. He was not really a dissident. He was not someone who stood up to the royal family and criticized their policies so directly over many years. And we felt that he was too tame. But he said, really, in a way that shows what a tragedy this was. This is not really someone who was considered a dissident. He had been an advisor to Saudi Arabia's chief of intelligence. He had been working in their embassy in both London and in Washington. And for someone like that to have been so brutally killed because he had criticized Saudi policies on Yemen, on its conflict with Canada, on allowing women to drive, you know, basically detaining people who are protesting, wanting the right to drive. For him to have been dealt with so harshly and in such a despicable manner was really quite shocking, I think, to everyone who knew that he wasn't a revolutionary in the context of Saudi Arabia. Yeah, and I think if we ever hear the audio tape from Turkey, if they ever do release it, I think many of us will not sleep at night for hearing what that man must have gone through. And I don't know how his sons really deal with that reality of what their father must have endured. No human in this world should ever have to go through that. And as journalists, we mustn't let that cower us to be able to speak truth to power.
Shannon, thank you so much for making the time and indulging me, taking you into conversations that are beyond what we called you in for.
Thank you.
Shannon Ibrahim is the Group Foreign Editor at Independent Media, and quite a discussion about the midterm elections in the US. Let's take a break.